thank you. I appreciate that. Well, thank you all very much for having me. You'll have to excuse my voice. See, one of the many things that Chancellor Cheek didn't tell me was this was the #1 allergy capital of the world. So I found that out recently. But it is a pleasure to be in front of you all this morning because my respect for what you do and what the Chamber of Commerce does really goes back to my first opportunity to be in intercollegiate athletics at East Carolina University. Because at that time, and this was in the mid-'80s, our total budget was $1 million. So you can put that in perspective when I first went there. And the Chamber of Commerce played a key role in the growth of us collectively being able to build the athletics program in East Carolina. And I'll tell you one little anecdote relative to that. At that time, it was not fashionable at all to paint anything on a water tower. It was taboo. But I wanted to paint the East Carolina Pirate logo on the water tower. So I went to the city and they said, we can't do that. You know, we can't even have a serious conversation about that. Long story short, as I got to know more and more business partners, people at the Chamber, they kind of went to bat. To this day, my wife and our youngest daughter, settled back there with her husband. And so we were visiting her last summer, and as we drove into town, it was nostalgic. I told Pam, I made her listen to the whole story again. There's the water tower that the Chamber stepped up and helped us with. But the Chamber of Commerce plays such an integral role in any city's efforts, in any athletic department, university. What I've always enjoyed about this profession is that everything is centered on the university. When you live in a university town, which I love, and Pam loves, my wife, everything is centered around the university, kind of the epicenter of what's happening. Relative to athletics, and I told Jimmy Cheek, who has been phenomenal, I told Jimmy when we were talking about this opportunity that athletics is not, should not be, and never will be the most important thing on a university campus. What it clearly is the most visible element within the total university structure. It's the rallying point. You know, Monday mornings are largely dictated in terms of moods by what happens in Neyland Stadium on Saturday. I mean, it affects people. You know, after a big win, people feel good. They come to work feeling good, they got a smile on their face. After a loss, see, I see some of you smiling because it's you. I'm talking about you. After a loss, totally different. Mood is totally different. It affects people's disposition. It affects a lot of things. So not only do we have the obligation athletically to be a driver relative to the economic impact that was mentioned a while ago, but it's a pride factor. It's a pride factor for our alumni, it's a pride factor for our fans to operate a clean, successful athletics program, one that can compete across the board for championships. And that's our goal, is to pursue comprehensive excellence in everything that we do. In competition, I used to coach, and I used to tell our players, and I still tell student athletes this today everywhere I've ever been, we don't want student athletes, while that clock is running, who are indifferent about whether we win or lose. Don't want them. Because when the clock is running, you should want to be successful. You should want to win. When the clock is not running, that should be the furthest thing from your mind, because that's when the more important things come into play. But to be competitive at the level we play in the Southeastern Conference, you have to have that level of drive and competitiveness, or you cannot achieve a level of success. Most of what I learned that I carried over into my career, I never learned in a classroom. And I'm very proud. I have 2 degrees, proud of those degrees. But through participation in athletics and being around it my entire life, my father was a football coach when I was growing up, first a high school coach, and then he got into college coaching, and then he transitioned into administration. He was athletic director at Louisville and Missouri and the commissioner of the Southern Conference. So I've been around it forever. But the lessons I learned through athletics, they formed my core values. wasn't what I learned in a classroom. The importance of teamwork, the work ethic, communication, learning how to win and how to lose with class, all the things that athletics teaches you. So what it did for me, it shaped me administratively, and I've said this my entire career, but I'm a student-athlete driven administrator. And those young men and women, they need to be at the core of everything we do and all the decisions we make and how those decisions impact them. Because too many times they get lost in this visibility shuffle. But one thing that's changed dramatically in our profession in the last 15 years is just technology and the media. You know, you don't have to go back very many years ago when we didn't have 24-hour cable sports. We didn't have talk shows. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have blogs. Don't raise your hand, but I bet there are bloggers in here. So it's totally different. And we have an obligation as the university's most invisible ambassador to make certain that we're representing the university in the proper way. Now, we're trying to teach 17 to 22-year-olds that they have that same responsibility. And that's difficult. If you think back to when you were 17 to 20 years old, and you're in the spotlight that these young people are in, and you've got to make good decisions, that's tough. But that's our obligation to help them understand that. And we work hard to do that. Lori Fuller, who is terrific, where is Lori? She's somewhere. When Lori asked me if I would come down and speak, by the way, I was with Chris. Chris Fuller is a terrific administrator. I knew Chris before I came to the University of Tennessee when I was in the Atlantic Coast Conference. Great administrator. We were together, we traveled to the Big Orange Caravan in Memphis last night, and he told me, Lori, getting off the plane, hey, I think I'm gonna stop by there in the morning. But we got home at midnight, so I'll probably see him later today. But we're blessed to have really good people here. We have good people. We have good coaches. We have good administrators. As we try to shape our direction, and I think we have a very positive direction, and I think people are excited about our direction. We've got to quit looking in the rearview mirror. It's well documented. We've had a tough 4 or 5 year run, but we've got to quit talking about that. We've got to get our vision forward and in a direction that can bring us out of it, and we're coming out of it. We're coming out of those tough times, and we're turning that corner. And we've rewritten our mission statement because what I would like is for our people, our student athletes, our coaches, our administration, to live it. My first 2 months on the job, and I've been here 7.5 months on the job, I had a series of one-on-ones with 60 staff members and coaches for about an hour to an hour and a half, just to talk, just to get their input, get their impressions on priorities and direction. And it was interesting that I had a standard list of talking points, one of which was, tell me what the mission of the Department of Athletics is currently. Nobody could tell me that. Now, we have a mission statement. It's in the media guide. But therein lies the problem. If you're not living your mission, you've wasted your time. So what we want to do, and we've restructured the department, made some difficult decisions because we had a large volume of people, which was largely driven by the fact that we were separate programs for so many years, men's and women's. And in the effort to merge those programs, and we had to reduce our staff because we had so many people and so much duplication that we had to go through a very difficult process. Hard for me, hard for the people, because these are good people. It wasn't about the people, it was about the positions that we were eliminating. So we're going to be better stewards of our own finances and then create a plan, a strategic plan for where we're headed in the future. We've got financial challenges, we've got some other challenges, but challenges are opportunities. So we're working collectively very hard to have that vision that we collectively share come to fruition. And we'll get back to where you are accustomed to the University of Tennessee being athletically. Now, we have sports that compete currently at the top of the pyramid, nationally and within the SEC. We want all of our sports to do that. We went through a very emotional day a couple weeks ago with Pat and that announcement. You know, I've been so lucky and blessed. I've worked with two icons who were as down to earth as anybody I've ever been around in my life, in Bobby Bowden and Pat Summitt. And I told them, independent of one another, years apart actually, that the highest compliment that I could give them is they never allowed success to change who they were. Now that runs against the grain of human nature. That's pretty hard. But those two individuals accomplished that. They're the same people today that they were when they were just beginning their careers. They treat people well. They have strong core values. They don't see themselves as iconic figures. But that was an emotional day. Pat is, and I've known Pat for many years. I never completed a search for a women's basketball coach during my career at East Carolina, Florida State, and Alabama without calling Pat Summitt to ask her about the final couple people I was looking at, because I wanted her input, wanted her opinion of that. But she's doing great. I talked to her yesterday morning before we left for Memphis, and she's excited about her new role, and I'm excited about her new role, and it's just good to have her still with us in our Department of Athletics. Last night when we traveled to Memphis, and when we turn around today and go to Murfreesboro, so we go back that way today, but we've got Derek with us, and Conzo, and Holly. I'm excited about Holly in her new role. And then Dave Serrano was with us last night because we play today down in Memphis, and then we go to Ole Miss for a series, and we had Condridge Holloway with us. So we have a good crowd that we're taking around the state on the Caravan, which is something I've always enjoyed. Always enjoyed being around our fans and our people. And let me tell you this, that I feel privileged to be in this leadership role. And that's how I view it. I don't think that Chancellor Cheek hired me to come in and manage athletics. I think he hired me to come in and lead athletics. And there's a difference. I've been around a lot of really good managers in my career, but I haven't been around a lot of great leaders. But those I have had the opportunity to work with, I tried to absorb all I could. Because when you're touching people who really are leaders, which many of you in this room fit that profile, then you need to absorb all you can. Because we're kind of shy a little bit, I think, in our society relative to good communicators and good leaders. So when you have those people in your organization, and we have them, and that's why I'm confident that we will escalate toward our goal quicker than probably most people think, because we have some good leaders. We've surrounded ourselves with good people. Leaders attract leaders. And it's true, whoever said it years ago, they're like eagles, they don't flock. Leaders don't flock. So I'm excited about being here, being in this role, and again, I feel very, very fortunate and privileged to be in this role. Dr. DiPietro, we have great leaders here, and it starts with him as the president of the system. And I've really enjoyed getting to know Joe and Deb. They're just great people, and he's also one of those people you can sit down and talk to him. Very, very bright. Don't be intimidated by that. He's very, very, very bright. But I've enjoyed very much his leadership. I'm going to let you ask a lot of questions, because my experience has been that you have questions, and I'll do my level best to answer those questions. It's interesting, last night on the Caravan, some of the questions you get, some of the questions Derek gets, you just go. But I'll tell you a quick anecdote on that about Bobby. When Bobby Bowden first went to Florida State, they were really struggling. And he was struggling his first few years as a coach, and he had a bad third year as a coach, and people were saying maybe we made a mistake bringing this guy here from West Virginia. So Gene Deckerhoff, who is the voice of the Seminoles. Been there a long, long time. Gene's kind of a legend himself. Also does the Bucks games. Gene Deckerhoff says he's out in the parking lot. He sees this figure. Gene's getting ready to get in his car, and he turns and he sees this figure coming out of the building, and it's dusk. And he looks, and it's Bobby. So he says he watches him come to his car, and Bobby's got a little briefcase, and he's fumbling around in his pocket for his keys, and he drops them. And Gene says, "Bobby!" Bobby looks around, he doesn't see anybody. He tries to get, he said, "Bobby!" Bobby looks around again and said, "Where are you?" He said, "It's Gene. Gene, it's Deckerhoff." He said, "I just want you to know we're having a bad year, and I still support you. I just don't want anybody to see me talking to you." And that's kind of, as a coach, you get, that's kind of the, you get into those things, you know. But let me answer some of your questions. Yes?
I think everybody in the room would agree you've been dealt a pretty tough hand here. I mean, and over the last several years, you've had major coaching changes in swimming, men's baseball, women's and men's basketball, football, basketball, and some of those have been difficult. I mean, how do you prioritize or balance continuity in the sports programs versus performance? I mean, how do you kind of view those two things?
That's a very good question. We do have a lot of new, if you will, new coaches, and not only are they new in the sense of their tenures, but they've inherited major rebuilding jobs, and that is not a statement of exaggeration. Derek Dooley inherited a major rebuilding job, and we had a lot of other things going on around that's been well documented. Conzo Martin inherited a rebuilding job. Dave Serrano, major rebuilding job. And really, to a lesser degree, not programmatically, because we have the best women's basketball program in the nation, but to a lesser degree, Holly has to replace 5 seniors. The last 9 games, we started 5 seniors. So in each case, those coaches face rebuilding jobs. There was a day and time when a new coach would come into a program, and it was almost a given that he or she would have 5 years to try to get it right, put it on a solid foundation, build it from there. But that was before the talk shows and the internet and the ESPN 24-hour cable sports. So the visibility exploded in terms of the scrutiny on coaches and fans' desire to have success be immediate in nature. We live in a whitewater world. We do. People want it now. You know, they even on the internet, you know, you try to pull something up, doesn't come up in 3 seconds. People are, you know, that's the society we live in right now. It's a microwave society. So there's more pressure on coaches. Now, they're very well compensated. Coaches are very well compensated. And I think that's fair, and they should be, because of the pressures they face and the expectations that they have upon them. And then one thing I've never done as a director of athletics, I've never told a coach upon hiring him or her that, listen, if you graduate your players and they're good citizens, and you represent the university well, you can coach here as long as you want. Because that's a lie. Because those aren't requests, those are mandates. Running a clean program, graduating your players, representing the university, those are expectations, those are mandates. So you shouldn't be rewarded for that. Now, you have to make progress in competition. And coaches do understand that. They're not naive to that. The question is, what is a reasonable period of time to rebuild a program? And that has a lot of moving parts, because there's no standard response to that, because no 2 situations are ever identical in nature. You know, some coaches inherit programs where there's a good base of talent. Some coaches inherit programs where the base of talent is not good, and they've got to need some few years to recruit to get the talent level up. So you got a lot of variables when you're trying to rebuild programs. But I think to your question and to your point, the reality is that those coaches that we're talking about, they're all trying to rebuild right now, and it takes some time. But I think in each case we're making a lot of progress. If you look at men's basketball, I thought Conzo did a phenomenal job this year, because in November and December we were not a good basketball team, and it was reflected in some of our losses. But once the players bought in, and that's part of that transition, once they bought in to what he wanted, and what he wanted was effort and defense first, and Jarnell Stokes helped a little bit when he got there. But they bought in. They bought in, and now we were a totally different team. We went from a team with a losing record and 1-4 in the SEC to the number 2 seed in the SEC tournament. I don't think that got enough attention, because that was a heck of a job, a great turnaround. But Conzo's building his team in his own image, and coaches do that often. Toughness, defense, no nonsense. That's what's happening there in that program. Dave Serrano is going to do the same thing. Dave's a really good baseball coach, and he's got a terrific staff. We just need to recruit. It all comes back to recruiting. You know, you have to have resources, you have to have commitment, you have to have leadership, and the last piece of the puzzle, you have to have players. You know, let's not kid ourselves. You know, you have to have players, because at the end of the day, that's no different than what you do in your jobs and what I do in my job. What separates really good companies from exceptional companies? People. If everything else is relatively equal, resources, so on and so forth, it's the people. They've got better people. They've got more people pulling in the same direction, sharing the same values. That's what takes them from good to great. That's how it works. It was no different with a team. I've been fortunate to be around a lot of championship level teams. All of them, no exceptions, had great leaders on the field, on the court. Because at some point, the coaches on the sideline, on the bench, can only do so much. Those teams that lack leaders, I've seen some really talented teams that were mediocre because they did not have any leader out there. So if you look at our football program, what Derek's trying to do, that's a big piece. I don't think we had a lot of people step up and lead last year, and you have to have that. And I think now this year we've got veterans. We had a tremendous amount of transition, 7 new coaches in our football program. But I'm very impressed with this group. I think the intensity level has already ratcheted up significantly, watching us at spring practice. I think that he's got a lot of veterans in that staff room now. I worked with Sal. Sal's a piece of work now. I worked with Sal for 3 years. Sal's outstanding, outstanding. And he'll get a lot out of those young men on the defensive side of the ball. Other questions? Yes?
Well, Lady Vols spent many, many years building an international brand, and now the departments are blended. How do you plan on keeping that brand, or do you? And are you keeping the logo? That's a question I've said many times. Right.
Let me back. I'll go from the back end. We haven't even had a discussion about the logo, so that's kind of. I don't know why that trepidation is present, because we haven't had a discussion about logos. What we have had a discussion about, we're combining the websites, because I think that's clearly the right thing to do. A little more than 80% of the hits we get are on the our primary website. They're not on the Lady Ball website. Give you a couple examples of that. We won the SEC Volleyball Championship. Now, I go in very early by choice. I always have. I like that quiet time early in the morning. And I always pull up the screen as soon as I get in. Well, the day after we won the volleyball championship, I pull up the screen, nothing on it. Then I realized, well, I got to go to the Lady Ball website to see that. Well, see, that's wrong. So that's 80% of people are not seeing that. Just like we won softball, we won the East. 80% of people can see that. Now, they can get there, but it goes back to what I told you earlier. Oh, I got to spend 5 more seconds? Nope. No, not going to do it. We're combining the websites because we should be celebrating our successes. across the spectrum of our athletics program, whether it's volleyball or women's tennis or baseball, or we now have a combined men's and women's swimming program. We should be celebrating our successes across the board. We have a great brand here at Tennessee. And the Lady Vol brand, which has primarily been driven by Pat's extraordinary success, we have a lot of equity in that brand. So that trepidation is unfounded, because we haven't even talked about that. But that's a very good question. What else? Did I miss a piece of your question?
No, that was it.
Okay. You know, we want to become one. We were the final athletics program to be totally separate, and we were totally separate, more so than I imagined from afar. And in some instances, that's just not healthy. The perfect example is what Matt Credits told me a couple days ago. We have combined men's and women's swimming, and Matt was a little concerned that there may be some pushback from the men's swimming team. Well, he said it's been phenomenal. You know, he had them all over to the house, and you know, because I'm student athlete driven, I talk to our student athletes a lot, and I enjoy going to our student athlete advisory council meetings and make time for them. I've always told anybody that I've worked with, from an executive assistant, and I'm blessed to have Rita. Rita's phenomenal. But I always tell them, look, if the chancellor calls, interrupt me. If the president calls, interrupt me. And if a student athlete wants to see me, interrupt me. Those are the three. Everything else is a busy day. They can probably wait. So I talk to a lot of student athletes. They're excited about the true combining of the programs because they've been so separate, to the point where teams weren't following teams. It was almost, again, it can reach an unhealthy level. So I'm pleased with what's happening with our combining of the men's and women's programs. Yes?
Yeah, you talked about when you're hiring coaches, and you called Pat and talked a little bit about leadership. What are some of the things you look at when you go to hire a coach? What's the most important criteria that you have?
That's a very good question. I think first and foremost, you have to get a good person. I mean, you just do. You have to get a good person who does have strong core values, because again, it goes back to the visibility and the representation that I mentioned earlier. You can't misstep. I mean, we're on probation right now. That's again well documented. You can't misstep. So I think first of all, you've got to have character in your coaches, and we've got that. You know, just the few that we're talking about today, it transcends them. But when you look at Conzo Martin, if you understand his background, he has great character. Derek Dooley, great character. Dave Serrano, great character. So I think you look there first. And then my second thing is, can they recruit? Even before I get into the coaching, can they recruit? Because again, coaching makes a difference because leadership makes a difference. But if I've got guys running 5.2s and you got guys running 4.2s, that's not good. So can they recruit is a key component. And then can they hire a quality staff? Because your level of success is dictated by who's around you. It's not dictated by you. There's no one person can achieve much of anything. It's dictated by how have you surrounded yourself with people who share your ideals and your work ethic. So that's next. And then just, you know, can they lead? Can they lead the program? So I think if you get all those components. Now I like intensity. That's just me, because that's how I'm wired. So I'm a textbook type A. Now I don't want all type A's around me because we would kill each other. But I think it's important that a coach leading that program have some intensity about him or about her. You think Pat had some intensity? Yeah, I think she did. And so I think those are some of the important qualities. Other questions? Yes?
Can you speak a little bit about the finances of the athletic department? I know you talked a little bit about our reserve fund being much smaller. so it, prevents you from, prevents that flexibility
Right.
for future planning. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Sure. Our financial position has been a surprise to me in that sense. We have a $102 million budget, but we ended the last fiscal year with a $14,000 surplus. So that got my attention when I came in. So in digging into that, and Bill Myers does a great job, Bill's our CFO, but I realized quickly that we only have a $5 million and a little change, $5 million reserve. And we have a huge debt service. So my concern is, to give you an example, Mississippi State, whose budget's half of ours, they've got $10 million reserve. So we compete against people with $40 to $130 million reserves. So I think we just need, when I say being better stewards of our finances, we need to turn our attention to long-term strategy relating to how do we build our reserve and how do we draw down our debt service. And we're in those conversations now. Anything else? Well, it has been my pleasure to be able to come here this morning, and even more so, it's a pleasure to be a part of this community. Knoxville is a terrific place. People have been wonderful to Pam and me, and we feel very, very much at home. I try to keep her out of stores where they have orange in the windows, because she's buying it all up. But we're happy to be here. Go Vols.